Our third award today is for the Irving and Jeanne Glovin Award. This award was initially sponsored by an endowment established by the Oskar Schindler Humanities Foundation, which was established in 2003, I believe. George, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And the objective was to foster research into the meaning and underlying principles for good human conduct. Again, a very relevant subject. The foundation is interested in stimulating scholarly work that defines, quote, good human conduct to explore its sources and develop pragmatic educational strategies and ways of teaching children to show by action respect and acceptance of others, regardless of circumstances or backgrounds. The spirit of the research is best illustrated by the words of Confucius: do not do unto others what you would not have them do unto you. Students are encouraged to demonstrate the importance of acceptance and mutual respect for others and the impact this behavior can have on society more generally. So what constitutes good human conduct and under what conditions? And what I've asked George Menchard to do, who is a committee member and the nephew of Irving and Jeanne Glovin, is to provide, we've done this last year as well, but to provide some additional context, a bit of backstory to the underlying and foundational principles for this award. George, can you help us out again this year?
Thank you very much. First of all, congratulations to all the award winners. It's delighted to be here and to see you receiving these awards. And I know that some of you know the story, so I'll make it short and to the point. Irv Glovin was my uncle, my mother's brother. During the Second World War, he was captured at the Battle of the Bulge and put into a German prisoner of war camp. After the war ended, he was freed by Russian troops. He wandered through Germany and visited a few of the concentration camps, including the one at Dachau, and then eventually made his way back to the United States, went to school, and became a lawyer. I won't hold that against him. He graduated from the University of Southern California and opened a practice in generally in the Hollywood area. His wife, my aunt, at that time, she subsequently passed away, was an artist, and she worked for the movie studios designing the little stills and gels that they used to use when they made cartoons, like the Looney Tunes cartoons and so on. Anyway, he opened his office near her, where she was working, and pretty soon he started having clients coming in who were survivors of the war, who were making claims against the German government for repatriation. And a large number of those clients kept mentioning the name Oskar Schindler and claimed that he had helped them. And it turned out, of course, in the long run, that they were on Schindler's List. Irv subsequently gathered these names, and he flew to Germany and he met Oskar Schindler, and they eventually became fairly good friends. Schindler eventually moved to Israel, and he died in Israel, and he's buried in Israel. When Irv came back to the United States, he had asked Oskar Schindler if he could, because he had a lot of Hollywood contacts as well, if he could get his life story. And Schindler said that it had been purchased by Warner Brothers Studio or something like that for $10,000. And Irv went to Warner Brothers and bought it back for $5,000. And then he hired, or was involved in hiring, Keneally to write the book called Schindler's List, which was the story of what Schindler had done during the war. And then through his second wife, my first aunt had died and he remarried, who was an actress. They met with Steven Spielberg, and Spielberg became interested in the story, and through something he has called the Shoah Foundation, if some of you may be familiar with that, and he decided to produce the movie Schindler's List. The only stipulation was he couldn't produce the movie until the studio, he'd made money at the studio, enough money at the studio to merit the production of the film because they thought Schindler's List would lose money. They said nobody's interested in those kinds of stories anymore. So they made him produce another film, and he produced Raiders of the Lost Ark, which made money. Not as much as Schindler's List, but it made money. Then he produced Schindler's List, and when Schindler's List comes on the screen, you see my uncle Irv. His name is on there as the associate producer of the film. So that's the background for it. Now, clearly he made money on the film, and he decided that he wanted to put some of that money to good use. And one of the things he did was fund scholarships in several universities around the U.S., and only one in Canada. We're lucky enough to have it here. Dealing with what constitutes good human behavior. There's one in Connecticut, one in California, one down south, and one here. There are 4 of them. So, the analogy that Irv used was this. Your government passes a law, and the law says that if you wear a blue shirt, you have to go to prison. And you live on this corner, and you have to wear a blue shirt for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. Maybe it's religion, whatever. The neighbor over here says the law says you're wearing a blue shirt and I'm going to turn you in. And so he reports you to the police, or she reports you to the police, and whatever happens, happens. This neighbor on this corner says, you know, it's a stupid law and you're a nice guy, so I'm just going to ignore you. I'm not going to turn you in. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and go on my merry way. Okay? This one says, they're going to arrest you. They're going to put you in prison. I'm going to help you any way that I can. So I'm going to go out and buy a red shirt and ask you to put the red shirt on top of the blue shirt. I'm not going to ask you to get rid of your blue shirt. I'm just going to kind of hide it so that you don't end up going to prison. Now, this person has obeyed the law. This person has ignored a terrible law. And this person has helped avoid a terrible law. Does that constitute good human behavior? Which of those persons is doing good human behavior? Schindler himself was an alcoholic. He was a Nazi of the first order. He was a womanizer. I could go on and on and on and on. But he saved over 1,000 people. He was, in fact, a good human being, depending on your definition of good human being. So that's the background behind this award. And the whole concept of the award is what constitutes good human behavior. Congratulations.
George, thanks for that. I never get tired of listening to that story. You always add a little bit more, and it's always interesting. It's always fascinating. By the way, Michael Smith, the executive director of the Shoah Foundation, delivered the Shar Shalom lecture here 2 years ago. And they're doing some amazing work, and it was a real honor to have him here to speak to the students. So I want to thank you, George. I want to thank the Glovin family. I want to thank the Oscar Schindler Humanities Foundation for the award and for giving us the challenge, for giving our students the challenge to address that really important question and subject. The recipient of the 2019 Irving and Jeanne Glovin Award is Keith MacIsaac for his paper, Happiness and Good Human Conduct, a Cross-Cultural Exploration. Professor Martha Radici of the Department of Sociology and Social Anthropology provided a great supporting letter in which she writes, quote, due to the excellent quality of critical reading and analysis that Keith has been undertaking for my Happiness, Play, and Celebration seminar, Keith is, in my opinion, very well positioned to write on the topic of good human conduct. His essay discussed the extent to which the concept of happiness is bound up with standards of good conduct in various cultural settings around the world, and it therefore deals with a crucial question in anthropological and sociological studies of happiness. Does being happy depend on being good? The supporting letter goes on to comment on Keith's use of empirical evidence from ethnographic studies of happiness in several different societies to engage cross-cultural analysis of the relations between happiness and good conduct, and concludes that, broadly speaking, happiness does indeed depend on treating others well. The selection committee this year included Marty Leonard, again this year, thanks very much Marty, Bob Hewish from the Department of, Marty by the way is the Dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies, Bob Hewish from the Department of International Development Studies, and George Mencher from Human Communications. And the committee agreed that Keith's paper was obviously well written, very well researched, and succeeds in encouraging further discussion of these really important questions. Dr. Hewish provided the following comment in his review of the paper. MacIsaac's paper takes an avant-garde approach to the theme of the Glovin Award. In many ways, the paper goes beyond meeting the criteria of the award and looking at how happiness can exist even in stressful and ethically complex situations. This take on happiness is bold, it's well-researched, and an intriguing thesis that encourages further scholarly inquiry. So on behalf of the committee and on behalf of everyone here, Keith, congratulations.
Thank you for that great backstory. I didn't know the history of the award, and it means a lot more to me knowing the background that I've been able to win it today. So thank you so much for sharing. And with that, hello everyone. Thank you for coming out today. I would like to thank Irving and Jeanne Glovin and the Oscar Schindler Humanities Foundation for making this award possible. I would also like to thank the selection committees and the Faculty of Arts and Social Science for choosing my essay. It's a great honor to have been selected for this award. I would also like to extend a special thanks to Dr. Radici, who introduced me to the field of social anthropology at the beginning of my undergraduate degree many years ago. They have supported my development as a student and writer over the last year, and it has truly been a pleasure receiving their mentorship. Dr. Radici provided the push to participate in the competition, and without their support and guidance, I wouldn't be receiving this award today. I wrote my paper for Dr. Radici's fourth-year seminar course on happiness, play, and celebration. I was inspired to write my paper based on the differing experiences of happiness across cultures. I thought that the pursuit of happiness within differing societies would tell a lot about the shared values of good human conduct within those cultures. I found the research for this paper to be thoroughly thought-provoking, and the unique method in the pursuits of happiness often tied to overarching societal values and demonstrated good human conduct. I've chosen an excerpt from the paper that focuses on young men's participation in militia groups in Guinea-Bissau to demonstrate how happiness and good human conduct are pursued under dire circumstances. Henrik V. spent 15 years on and off conducting anthropological fieldwork in Guinea-Bissau and observed the perpetual cycles of conflict and suffering that dominates life there. In line with the idea of effective forecasting presented by Stafford, young men in Guinea-Bissau have visions of happiness that they aim to reach through participating in militia forces. Their participation in conflict is often void of collective vision or ideological standpoint, and the experience of happiness they strive for is often elusive and elusive. Due to the perpetual conflict that has highlighted Guinea-Bissau since its independence, young men find themselves with a lack of livelihoods or possibilities, and often experience social displacement and exclusion due to a lack of economic, social, and political agency. The factors that drive many young men to join militias are closely tied to ideas of good human conduct in Guinea-Bissau. Similar to elsewhere in Africa, ideas of masculinity and social value are tied to a man's ability to provide for his immediate family and relatives. In addition, and in line with Archibald's 2015 findings in Mozambique, dating and intimacy are closely linked to giving gifts and to gift giving and consumerism, which is impossible for young men to participate in because of their lack of resources. Due to the ongoing cycles of conflict and suffering in Guinea-Bissau, many young men lack the economic and social resources to provide for their families or engage in intimacy practices, and perpetually exist in a state where it is increasingly impossible for young men to gain the social positions and possibilities expected of them, leaving them detached and distanced from who they ought to be. It is under these circumstances that young men have been able to find happiness through the dangerous act of militia life. Despite the risks of physical harm from armed combat, all the young men that V interacted with valued militia involvement, since it was a way of gaining entry into a social and patrinormal network, providing not just access to flow of resources and possibilities, but security through mutual dependence and obligation of protection. Men who joined the militia were granted access to material resources, which they in turn used to provide for their family, and which enabled them to participate in social intimacy practices of the culture, both of which are features of good human conduct in the Guinea-Bissau context. V writes that the most obvious connection between mobilization into militia, happiness, and well-being in this perspective is that it offers provisions in a landscape of scarcity, and that it brought men social status and the ability to be seen as a person of worth with ability to act and attract. Through these avenues, it is apparent that participating in militia activities, while dangerous, enables young men to experience happiness through security and access to resources that militia life brought, and allowed them to engage in behaviors of good human conduct in an environment of conflict and struggle. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Keith. One of the really fascinating things about these papers, and a lot of the papers we've read, is that they address a level of complexity that is so needed today, because I think some of the most challenging arguments out there require that measure of complexity to work your way through the issues we're facing. And I think simplicity is a pretty powerful mechanism through which to sell really dangerous policies and practices and values and visions. And so that's one of the things that I thought was really interesting. These really complex papers dealing with very difficult issues, and we need more of that. And that's precisely why the humanities and social sciences are so vital to work through the challenges we face today. So thank you again to the students. Congratulations to all of the award recipients. Congratulations to the other students who submitted the papers. Thank you to these the supervisors, the faculty sponsors, for pushing the students to submit those papers and working through the papers and the arguments with the students. Special thanks, of course, to the judges and the faculty members who served on the committees. Obviously, an important thank you to the donors that created the endowments that give us an opportunity to celebrate this kind of research. And an extra super duper special thank you to Genevieve for all of her work, working on the websites for these papers and posting the videos and the PDFs, working on the notices and the calls for applications, getting the judges together, the committee work, the announcements, the notes on the awards and the comments from the judges, the receptions, the pictures. It's an enormous task, and you've done such a great job, so thanks very much for that. Thank you everybody for coming. Please enjoy and eat the rest of the food, and it's a great opportunity to talk to the award recipients as well. Thanks very much for coming.